some people would just like to see Comcast and AT&T and those other companies just invest a lot more and build their networks. Me being more of an ecosystem guy, that worries me. I don't want to see one or two massive networks. I want to see thousands, hundreds of thousands of overlapping networks.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. I mean, of our 50 communities, there's a huge mix of networks, some municipally owned, some privately provided, some co-ops. And the more the merrier, the more diverse networks and application developers we have, the more likely we're going to come up with the next browser and the next Alta Vista.
Well, it's funny because he keeps mentioning Alta Vista. I remember the first day I got on the internet and I couldn't figure it out.
What are you going to do with it?
This was like 1994, 1995, and I went to a friend who had been on the internet, and I was like, I can't find it. There's nothing here. Like, at least America Online, you can find things.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, well, go to web crawler. I'm like, what's web crawler? Oh, it's a search engine.
Yeah,
and it blew my mind.
And it was really the search engine and the browser that started said, oh, okay, now I know what to do. We're trying to come up with a set of applications and services that have that same aha impact.
Right. It's a little disappointing. I mean, it's sort of our gopher system was
I know.
the earlier times. So.
And that's a good example of why you want many people innovating, because who knows who's going to come up with the best mousetrap. Right. You want more the merrier.
And Chris, you bring up an interesting point, because it is really about the provider, you know, and open access means you'll have more than one, and you'll go to the best one, the best price, and the best performance. But that's not going to happen in our network because we are so rural and the pie is so small, really. We have a total of 7,500 passes that we could, but we have high-watt broadband communications that's going to operate our network, and they do more than that. They inspire us. They have a mission statement from their board of directors to go out and do good with technology in rural Minnesota, and they hold to that mantra, and we're very, very excited to have them a part of it, because they're that rare provider that says, yeah, I have to make a little money from you, but I really want to improve your life, and I really want to improve your education. I want to improve your health care. So that drives us, and that's a critical component to our success.
One of the things that I love about HBC, and there's so much to enjoy about them, is that they don't operate like a traditional private sector company in some ways. I mean, they're incredibly efficient. They do a really good job. But it's interesting to note that they're largely controlled by a nonprofit. Most of their shares or their ownership comes from a nonprofit based out of Winona. You know, with this vision of trying to bring technology to a larger part of the public that would get it just under the regular market. And so I absolutely agree with you in terms of HBC. And there's other local companies that do a great job too.
That's true.
You know, my concern, and I raise this all the time, is that I worry that in the long term, you know, companies that don't have the security of an HBC, where they're owned with a specific mission, you know, the founder may pass it on to the children who may not have the same vision. Right. They may have a buyout from a larger company. So, you know, I hate to tell some of these really inspiring local private companies that I tend not to encourage their model, but they can be very inspiring.
Well, I'm very excited about the cooperative model. We started out as kind of a municipal model, and the bond market didn't allow it to happen. But the cooperative model is so good for this because they're focused on maximizing benefits, not profits. And the shareholder-driven ILECs are shareholder-driven. They have to maximize profits, not a benefit. And the business model, the investment necessary in a small rural network doesn't work for an ILEC. It just doesn't. So
and when you say ILEC, that's the incumbent
That's
provider.
The CenturyLinks and the Frontiers and even the larger cable companies. Mm-hmm. So the cooperatives in the upper Midwest, North Dakota has a 10,000 square mile fiber to the farm network. Minnesota, Paul Bunyan has done incredible things in northern Minnesota.
The co-op, as well as the mythical figure.
Right, right.
A lot of our lakes, I understand.
And David's ox, too.
Share the credit, share the credit.
Can I touch on something Mark said about coding? We're encouraging many of our communities involved in the US Ignite to join a program called Tech Hire, which is an administration program designed to identify demand for coders and then come up with non-traditional ways to provide the supply of coders. And it's matching in each city. I'm going to encourage Winthrop and the other 9 cities to get involved. But one of the things that coding does is it provides a path to the middle class in a very short period of time. So you can become a coder in 6 months very easily and have a great job. You don't. There's a bias on the part of many employers to require a 4-year degree, but in fact, you don't need a 4-year degree to become very good at coding and do what these companies need. So we're trying to break down some barriers, and there will be 50 or 60 cities in Tech Hire, and I think one of the reasons we're encouraging cities to take part of them, to develop applications, you need coders. And there are 500,000 open coding or tech jobs in the country right now. It's the largest occupational category.
There should be 10,000 open quality assurance jobs. I actually have a background both as a coder and as a tester to some extent. As a high school student, I worked with a local firm, and I was an intern. I did some coding to produce automated testing. And I can say both from my father, who is a national lecturer and works on the quality assurance, as well as just my own use of products. We need a lot more people doing quality assurance testing to make sure these things actually work. But my background as a coder, I think it's fascinating because it gets you to think in a different way, kind of like math. I think the point of math isn't necessarily just that you're able to do a derivative. It's that you makes your brain work in certain ways. And coding, I think, can really do that as well.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a $100 million Department of Labor grant competition to come up with ways for the communities to reach former offenders, disconnected youth, and folks with disabilities, and bring them into the coding world. So going to be urging lots of, and it is a different way of thinking. But some of these kids who have a parent dead end future, suddenly the light goes on and oh, I could do this. And because many kids today are coders in a sense by using their cell phones. And so they have an aptitude. They're used to using many of the devices that they can code for.
Well, I think we have a future potentially as a society that uses applications, or we have a future of someone that can tinker and tinkering and being able to develop your own applications and modify others is tremendously important. I mean, I often think, as someone who's from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, the tinkering, particularly in areas that are off the beaten track, has been essential. And right now we're on the risk of losing that, both through, I think, the lack of skill, if people don't have the opportunities, but also legal threats that are preventing people from being able to access their machines. So, if this is the kind of thing where having this kind of network allows everyone that's growing up in the school districts, in Sibley and Renville counties, to be able to learn some of these skills and actually move us toward a world where we have some control over the software that controls our lives, rather than just, I would say, the Apple model, which is can't touch it, it does what it does, and you don't have any control over it. I think we all want to live in a world where we have a little bit of control.
Yeah, and many of the communities we're working in have not only incubator space or accelerator spaces, but maker spaces. And the same type of individuals are in both places and connected with a network. By the way, there's a great, you're probably familiar with Bruce Katz, who coined the phrase, well, he writes a lot about innovation districts. He went to Chattanooga, which I think is one of the early adopters of these fiber networks. He said there are three things that make this work and help them create the 4,000 jobs Mark mentioned. One is placemaking. They've created an environment where people want to be, right? Second is they've had an anchor infrastructure component. Some places it's a streetcar. In Chattanooga, it's a fiber network that reaches 170,000 end users. And then probably equally important is an innovation collaboration. So they've got all elements of the city pulling on the same oar, trying to innovate around this fiber network.
That's very powerful.
I'm curious, both between building the network, you face financial barriers, and we've talked about that some, and that's been discussed endlessly elsewhere, because everyone faces financial barriers. What are some of the other barriers that you've faced, and I would say one that you faced maybe, and one that you anticipate facing as the network's built and you're trying to drive usage of it?
We'll start with the first one. We decided early on that we had to educate people, and they had to understand what the opportunity was. Let's build a fiber network. Okay, no. Why would you want to build a fiber network out here in Sibley County? Well, because we can do this, 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 and this. And we mailed, and I'll give a credit to the Fiber to the Home Council, their primer.
And broadband communities,
and
yes.
broadband
They work
communities,
together.
absolutely. Scott DeGarmo was instrumental in all of this. We mailed 14,000 of their primers to everybody in our project area twice.
Yeah, so when you did that the first time, I thought, well, this is interesting, but no one's going to read them. Like, if I get something in the mail, I'm a busy guy.
Some did.
No, a lot did. It was amazing to me how well it worked. I mean, people just dug right into it.
That's why that lady stood up and said, this is a no-brainer. I read it, I listened, I thought about it. My goodness, this just makes too much sense. And, fiber is future-proof. I had a conversation with a person at the state, and they need to have vision, and they need to see things, and they need to buy into things. They need to get away from the strong lobby from the phone and a cable company here in Minnesota. But if a definition of unserved, and that was a big conversation 2 years ago, what's unserved mean? If you're not served with a fiber optic line, you're unserved. End of story. If you don't have gigabit connectivity, you're unserved. Now I know you have 50 megs in the city and 100 megs if you want it, and that's not what I mean, but in 10 years, if you don't have a gig symmetrical to your home or business, you're going to be unserved.
Well, I feel like I'm unserved because my prices go up every year. It's not just, the fiber is incredibly important, but it's also, there's accessibility questions. So I think it doesn't stop with that, but it starts with that.
And that's what the cooperative will do down in RS Fiber. It will take its profits and put them right back into the network. We don't have to pay out all the shareholders. We don't have a stock that has a ticker number on Wall Street that goes up or down. We don't make analyst calls. It's locally owned. It's owned by the
So
people.
you've educated people. What's the next barrier that you think you face in terms of whether it's developing these applications or what comes next?
I think it's the downbeat. Horns up. This network is under construction. It will take 5 years to build out completely, but in the meantime, we need to get some ensembles of making music, and it's how we do that. It's this innovation center, how we apply it, what's the benefit, how does the third grader benefit, or the sixth grader, how does the senior citizen, how does the newspaper benefit?
Well, let me ask you, we didn't touch on this, but tell me about GFW and why it's relevant to this conversation.
Well, GFW.
What is GFW?
It's the Gibbon, Fairfax, Winthrop school district. A town, a paired. They say, and I believe it's true, 6 years ago, the first iPad school in the nation. And a third of their kids go home and have no connectivity. They have nothing on the farm. So when we went out and said to people, we want to build fiber to the farm, they said yes. They understand that. And so that drove the need. So there were a couple of reasons our project was successful. Big reason. One was Jeff Bertrand, who was our superintendent at the time. He saw iPads. He said, we want them. And Jeff Nielsen was the general manager of the local co-op who encouraged us and seeded us. And those two people were instrumental in making this happen. So I'm off a topic here, I'm sorry, but in the future, it's about how we make it relevant in people's lives. It's about US Ignite, it's about what works, it's about how do you make a difference.
Now I'm curious what barriers, what are your chief barriers? I mean, as you started off with a grant from the National Science Foundation, and now you've found alternate sources of funding as well.
Sure.
So let's ignore the financial stuff.
Okay.
No one in a nonprofit can ever do that.
We're self-sustaining.
Right.
I think the barriers that we face are similar to the barriers you face in deciding to put in next generation fiber infrastructure, and it's lack of vision, right? People don't say, okay, why do we need this? We can do, so first one is finding people who have a vision. The second is finding people who have a will, who are going to fight the battles, because I'm sure pioneers like you, Mark, have a lot of scars from fighting the battles, and Harold DePriest down at EPB in Chattanooga. Third is creativity. It's just kind of piecing together elements of the ecosystem so that you have the right people thinking about coding and developing new applications. And then fourth is what I'll call blocking and tackling. And it's basically having somebody who wakes up every morning saying, okay, now that we have this infrastructure, what are we going to do to take advantage of it? And almost everybody we start talking to, no matter how, everyone is so accustomed to using the available speeds and lack of symmetry that they start off developing applications that could run on today's network. We don't want that. We want you to think more broadly and get outside the box. So we are constantly saying, no, let's try this. Do something that really leverages the network.
One of the things that municipal networks face is a similar sort of challenge, which is that you have this municipal network and 40 or 50% of the public in a high take rate scenario are on it, right? So you have, there's some cities that have done far better than that. The majority of these municipal networks that are citywide are probably in the order of between 35 and 50% of the community takes. That means you can't develop an app for the school that is only available to those kids whose parents have signed up for the municipal network. Because you have some kids who may not be on any network, you have some kids that are on an incumbent cable network, some kids are on DSL. And so it's one of those things that I think municipal networks have so much promise, but as long as they're based on a model of having people have to subscribe to them and paying money, it's harder to roll out and think about how to change the game with them.
Yeah, that's a challenge we face all the time. And our approach to that is to create applications that are so compelling running on the fiber that the other providers have to upgrade to fiber speeds. So in Chattanooga, for example, I use that example because they're probably the farthest one along. They have a IMAX aquarium, and they're making a link between the aquarium and the school system.
I think it might be the world's largest freshwater aquarium or something like that.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And they're making a link between the aquarium and the school system. And they're thinking about putting on the website that's only really accessible via fiber, very, very high quality, immersive programs from the aquarium. And the more that, the 40% become maybe 60% for the fiber provider, and that will eventually drive the alternative providers to reach that level. But it's a challenge if you're trying to match what students have in schools. By the way, schools a lot of schools have fiber these days. We found in Flint, Michigan, which does not have great speed to the end user, they have 10 gigabits service connecting every school and every university innovation center. So we're taking advantage of that.
Michigan has that great Merit network.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that connects a lot of the educational.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that I think about in terms of these challenges is that I would really like to see more co-ops. I love that you've created a new model, that RS Fiber has created a new model. I know you're modest about taking credit for all this stuff because a lot of people have helped out, but RS Fiber has created a new model for creating co-ops, which I think is important. But to really get fiber out to everywhere, I would really like to see more co-ops getting inspired, both electric co-ops and telephone co-ops, some of which might have to expand beyond their service territory. And I'm curious, you've talked with a lot of these sorts of folks, generally the folks that are already into it. But do you have a sense of what it may take to get other co-ops interested?
Well, to find a solution, a high-speed fiber solution for rural Minnesota, rural America, it seems to me that the electric co-ops provide that pathway in because they can follow their electric line into the house, and in northern Minnesota it works up in the Arrowhead, up in Cook County, Arrowhead Electric, it's all rock up there, and so all their fiber goes overhead to their homes. That makes sense to me. But there's also another play that we kind of stumbled across. Dan Pecorino kind of didn't stumble across it.
He's the general manager of HBC.
He thought of it. We're going to build this fiber ring that connects 10 cities, and off of that fiber ring, we're going to put up very high-speed wireless to serve the rural for 3 years.
Right, this is not Wi-Fi. This is a 25 megabit symmetrical product.
Right, and then take that cash flow, put it aside, and then in the third year, in 2018, we'll use that to leverage fiber to the farm. So it's a transition step, The farmers understand, well, it's on average $10,000 per farm to build out in our network. On average, it's $2,500 per house in town. Well, how do you make that work? How do you take 10,000 out here and 2,500 here, transition it with wireless off the fiber backbone makes sense. Eventually, they'll have fiber to the farm, but it's just going to take a little bit longer.
One of the things that I think sometimes spurs some of the co-op changes of heart is you have someone who's been around for a long time and might not recognize the power of these networks, and they're replaced by some younger general manager who I think may be more inspired.
Deanne Newville over in Renville Sibley Electric is a firecracker, is a dynamo of energy to build these fiber to the farm networks. She heard about our network, she got involved, she brought in loans and grants just like that.
Is she one of the older people?
She's a new, younger CEO
Right.
of a rural electric, and she will tell you, I won't put those words in her mouth, but a lot of these established electric co-ops have an older board of directors, and they just can't think outside the box because it's not relevant.
Right, and I think it's not a matter of them not getting that it's valuable. I think it's for them, it's a question of, should we go out on a limb? Should we diversify? Should we try on something new?
They should do what their forefathers did when they built the REA system in the beginning. They took great risk. They went out on a limb. They put, that's what they did. And they're afraid today, I think, to take that risk. And we need to take risks, Bill, right?
Sure. It's a leap of faith.
US Ignite is a risk.
It's a leap of
in some
faith,
respects,
sure.
Because you're reaching for something that's not there, but you are convinced is going to be there. And
That's what we've always done as a country. We've always reached for the undeniable, undeniable functionality. It's a competitive necessity in today's global world. If we don't do this, we're going to start losing to other countries around the world who are putting the fiber in place.
Right. Well, and if your population has been declining in a city or a county for 5 decades or 6 decades, and you don't have a plan for how to make it more attractive for young people to come back from the university, for jobs to materialize, I think that's the greater risk in some respects.
Sure. That's one of the things that advanced fiber communities are finding the kids are coming back. You know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, and because it's hip, they're getting jobs, and it's a great place to be. You know.
Well, that's terrific. I want to just thank you guys.
Sure.
I want to thank the Blandon Foundation for having this great event today. We're at the Border to Border Conference, and it's been Bill Wallace with US Ignite.
Thanks.
Thank
Enjoyed
you.
talking to you.
I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and Mark Erickson with RS Fiber Cooperative.
Thank you.
Well,
Great.
I guess one of the people who inspired RS Fiber, but actually your job title is Econ
I'm
Economic.
the EDA director for the city of Winthrop.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.